Florida, and Jack Parsons chased him down. Robert A. Heinlein, what he did is he wrote about a lot of this stuff and he hid it in his sci-fi. And I didn't realize until I was a lot older, because I had read them as a kid and I just loved the sci-fi stories. One thing
Right.
he said there's three ways to lie. You can outright deceive, you can tell the truth so bad nobody will believe it, and you can omit facts. And the way that secret societies do it is the latter two. They reveal the method by telling it to you so cheesy you'd be like, oh, that's BS. And B, they omit.
Right.
So the way I think what's going on in Hollywood, it's not like as cheesy as they would have you believe. It's more like you said, this cash cow and the people who manage him. There's 20 or 30 of them together managing these cash cows, trying to find a way to get the cash cow blind to the fact that it's in a pen with other cash cows. And they use things like occultic shenanigans to do that. But when you take off all the layers, it's just a bunch of greedy bastards confederating together, I think.
Right. And that's at least with R. Kelly, all that I've seen is just the profit or greed factor. I haven't seen anything. They don't touch on any of that in the series. I haven't seen anything connecting him to any kind of occult stuff.
He was hand in glove with Jay-Z, and Jay-Z's like ground zero for that in the hip hop Hollywood industry. He's like, you look into Jay-Z. I've heard that,
but have you seen anything that really?
Here's what I heard that blew my mind. I did a comedy show at a place called Sal's Comedy Hole on Melrose in Hollywood. And it's a nasty little comedy club at the back of Italian food joint, but that nobody but comics who nobody knows about goes to. After the show, I'm walking out, and there's these people in an apartment. It's a guy and his gal, and the dude at one time wanted to be in hip hop. And I don't know what he was talking about, if it was true or not, but he was telling his buddies all these stories about how Jay-Z just walked into the studio, dropped his pants, and said, do what you want so I can have money. And I don't know about that. I don't know if that's true. That's a story I heard out of nowhere. And so I started going down the rabbit hole. I was like, well, who the heck is this guy? Is that plausible? And it turns out he's into a lot of occultic stuff. So is Lady Gaga. So is Beyonce. These people, you know their name. If you look into it, you look into their imagery, you look into the themes of their music, you read their lyrics. Beyonce fashions herself as a goddess. So all these sort of things do sort of indicate, I don't know what they're into, but it's a little bit left of center.
Well, I know what you're talking about, and I've seen a lot of stuff. I'm very, and this comes from somebody who's very much a pro conspiracy theories for the most part, and we do have I do have some skepticism, and this is one of those areas where I tend to be skeptical, only because I've seen so much regarding this, connection of celebrities, especially musicians, and the Illuminati. And I've seen a lot of stuff that seems to me to be, when you're looking for something that you want to be there.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like, I see a lot of that. I've seen a lot of like YouTube videos and then pictures or collages that some crackpots put together where he's like, look, you see that triangle right there? That's the fucking triangle. It's the Illuminati. It gets a little crazy, and it's like,
the reality is, it's just like those kids in high school who were drawing that filigree S that had the 3D look to it, or the Anarchy A. They just thought it was a cool thing to draw in their notebooks, and then it got on their route. I'm with you on that. So that's why I say I don't know what it is, but it's kind of left of center. I do know that there seems to be quite a lot in the music industry about sexualizing people that are young.
That's true. That's very true.
And a lot of that coincides with a lot of cultic stuff. And there seems to be a lot of instances of people disappearing. MTV's got some real subversive elements. I think if there is anything, what happens is they do the revelation of the method thing where they tell the truth so crazily it seems stupid. And the reality is that, but not quite so stupid. Like, instead of some secret handshake, they just have a guest list. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing.
I want to take a quick break for a moment, because I'm remembering something, and I don't want to skip past it and forget it for later. But this happens to be the I guess is it the birthday? Sativa, are you there?
Yes, I am here. And yes, he would be 72 today.
It's David Bowie's birthday today. And I know that was something that you wanted me to make sure to address and point out. And happy birthday to David Bowie. He is sorely missed. Changes, turn and face the strange changes. I love it. I miss that guy.
He had some fun music. He had some fun music, all right.
He really did.
Man, Changes.
What's that?
Oh, I was just saying Changes. I always think very fondly of it. Was my mother's favorite song, and it was actually the last song I played for her before she died.
Oh, Jesus. Man, did I fucking pick the right song or the wrong one? I don't know.
Perfect. I've heard it. So I've literally already heard that song like 5 times today, and it just makes me smile because it makes me think of Bowie and my mom. So it's all good.
Yeah, I think, it's funny you should say that because I think that was one of the songs that I heard when I was a kid that really turned me on to listening, to pay attention to him more. Like, okay, what else has this guy done? Because I like that. Right? So sometimes you hear an artist and you're just like, okay, that's a cool song, and you just don't care about but that song hit me, and I was like, I need to know more about whoever the fuck this guy is. And that's how I got into
and it's actually not a totally random tie-in because Bowie spent a lot of time. He was very much into researching things of occult nature, esoteric stuff, and around the early 70s, because Changes was released in 1972. And it was actually right around that time that he was really kind of coming into his own and looking into a lot of this imagery and a lot of the cool stuff going around. And yeah, he was actually extremely, extremely well versed in all that, and it reflects comfortably in a lot of his music. Like, let's see, in fact, in the song "Quicksand," he actually mentions Aleister Crowley.
Right.
Wow.
So, God, Auger, you're really dating yourself here. Fuck you. Changes was old when I was a kid, God damn it.
Yeah, you're good. But no, so I just wanted to point out that wasn't a totally random tie-in by any stretch of the imagination. Also, there's a theory that David Bowie predicted that Kanye West would be the next David Bowie, which I'm like, that's bullshit. Stop that. And they're actually no shit, because they're using the album The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars as a large basis for this theory. Now, on that album cover, he's standing in front of a sign that says K West. Now, that album was released in 1972. What do you know? And it was it was shortly thereafter that Kanye West was born, and then they fast forward to his final album, Black Star, that he released in 2016, right before he passed away, actually. And subsequently, one of the lines in there, of course, the song is called Black Star, but one of the lines in there is talking about, someone took his place. And so they're theorizing that Kanye West was the Black Star, and there's a whole bunch of number garbage that it goes through, and I'm like, don't you put that evil on David goddamn Bowie. He didn't do this to us.
Well, it seems a little goofy, but if you were running a school and you were going to cast somebody in a play, you'd look at the students from freshman to senior year, and you'd kind of scope out who looked like they were worth your energy and time and who was just screwing around. And you'd kind of move those kids through from freshman to senior. I found that out getting a degree in theater. It doesn't seem off the reservation for me to consider that people in the music industry might watch stars and might manage them like that. Because I tell you what, a lot of the fame and fortune people get isn't necessarily because they're good or talented. A lot of time it's because they fit a niche in a production company's sort of machine, if you will. And it's like, oh, that guy, he's got an ethnicity. He's popular with this community. He's not going to get it on his own, but if we bankroll him, we can own the guy, and then we've got a property. That sort of thing.
A lot of it, too, you kind of got to weed out some of the rumors or myths or what have you regarding the connection between the music industry and occultism, because half of it, if not more, is just the music industry being what it is. Rock and roll is subversive. It always has been. It's always meant to represent rebelliousness and rebellion. And what is more rebellious than the devil and fucking, upside down crosses and fucking pentagrams and talking crazy shit and fucking dressing all weird and fucking, you got Alice Cooper with his fucking blood, fake blood dripping out of his mouth on stage. This was just part of the culture. It was part of it was dress up. It was for fun. It's just stage work. And I think you've got to consider that.
Some of it is, some of it isn't. I think there is an element of that. And Alice Cooper's a great example because Alice Cooper, he had his rebellious period and then he turned into a Christian and he quit doing that. Like he doesn't even cuss on his radio show anymore. He still puts on a show when he goes and performs and wears the makeup and stuff. But for him, it is exactly what you're saying. For Bowie, I don't believe Bowie was just putting on an act at all. I think Bowie really bought into a lot of that stuff.
Really?
I absolutely do. I mean, Bowie, look at the way he dressed. Listen to the songs and changes. Suffragette City, the Man Who Fell to Earth, all of that stuff.
That movie?
Oh my God!
Seen it. I've read it. I've read about it. I've seen it.
Okay, I've seen. I had a girlfriend who was like, "You got to watch this," and I was like, "All right, sure." Bowie's. I had no idea. That movie is a fucking clusterfuck. It's such a head fuck of a film. Yeah. Like, what the fuck am I watching? What's going on? It's so weird.
Oh man, fun fact, he was so coked out of his fucking mind. He basically doesn't, no joke, he literally does not remember shooting most of that movie.
That's
I'm not surprised.
He was fucked
not
up.
Fucking surprised.
Yeah.
What was weird was seeing a young, oh God, what was his name? He's got that weird name.
Rip Torn.
Rip Torn. Rip Torn's in there, and he's young for Rip Torn at least.
A baby, yeah. Yeah, he was only like 60.
He's naked, messing around with like his fucking students. He's a professor, and he's fucking his students. Oh God, that movie's hilarious. It's weird. I don't think I'd ever watch it again, but it's fucking. it's worth a mind fuck at least once. That's such a weird moment.
And there's a lot of films, there's a lot of narratives, there's a lot of albums that are there. They have to be oblique because if they come, it's sort of like, I don't know. There's definitely something going on, not with everybody, but there are definitely people up there who are swimming around the top, who are pulling that shenanigans. And my theory is this: like, you can go about making your bones the hard way, or you can sell out and be somebody's puppet and get what you want quicker. And I think a lot of people do the latter, and they try and protect their interests as a result.
That's rock and roll mythology right there. You've got the old blues player who couldn't, he goes down to the crossroads and he makes a deal with to be able to play the guitar. I mean, that is melded right in with the with the culture, with the industry. That's part of rock and roll, man.
Yeah, so I think what that ultimately ends up meaning is some of these people, whether or not what they believe in is true, they think it is, and they're conducting themselves that way. And I say all that because R. Kelly ran a little cult, apparently.
Yes. Okay. So let me explain to you, because have you watched these miniseries episodes? You watched them all?
I have not had time. I've just been reading synopsises, and I know little things, and I'm trying to not overspeak what I don't know, but I know things here and there.
So I guess going back to, because we digressed quite a bit. So he had the Aaliyah thing, and I guess the reason that he went to marry her was because they worried that she was pregnant. Now, they don't really go into whether she was, and if she was, did she have the baby? Did she not have the baby? They don't talk about any of that. It was just there was a baby scare, and he thought, well, I better marry her. So at first, you're like, okay, well, that seems like you fucked up. You picked a younger girl. She was 15 at the time. At this point, he's like in his early 20s. So there's still it's still a bad situation. but it's not as bad as it gets later.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
like he had his people forge her age on the documentation so that when they got married, it said she was 18. Her parents later had the marriage annulled. And then he goes back to doing what he does, and they were trolling malls. They were going through fucking malls, him and his boys, and he'd find young girls, and he'd point to them, and then his bodyguard would go over and hand the girl his number, and they'd be texting. I've never heard of this before. I've never fucking heard of this before. I've never heard of any artist going through the mall and being like, "Hey, little girl, here's my number," and then texting her and calling her and then having her come to his house. And then his thing was he would want to be called daddy. Like, from now on, you're going to call me daddy. And he was, I guess there was some girl called Sparkle who's in the industry, and he helped her. She was like his backup singer, and she brought some young girl, her niece, and I guess that's the girl in the video.
Oh my god!
That's who's in the video. That everybody that's famous now. I'd never seen it. It wasn't until after I watched those episodes I was like, "Is this for real? Like, is it really him?" Because I'd never seen it. So you go, a quick Pornhub search, and there's like a 5-minute thing, and I'm like, God damn, that's him. Yeah. So that was what trips me out is apparently she's fucking like 14 or 15 in that video. So I'm shocked. I fully expected that when I searched it, that I'd get Google waving its finger at me like, "Nah, son, you can't watch that shit like this. We don't put child pornography on, make it available for just anyone." But apparently it's different because it's R. Kelly or something. I don't know. Like, you can't, what the fuck's going on? Why is this on the internet? Why can anybody just access this when it's been said that, oh, that's right, that's why. Because when he went to court for this, apparently he says it's not him, and she says that's not her. And her parents deny that it's her. So he got away with it. Like,
yeah. And that's the thing about
that scot-free.
And see, you're right. You make an interesting point. That video should not be available, but it is. Yeah, there's millions of double standards that are everywhere in our society today, and the disconnect is
me out, dude.
The people who have power and are noted into this stuff do what they want, and people who aren't approved get derided. So I don't know what the deal is exactly. I feel like if there's some uber conspiracy here, R. Kelly got his notch position, and they have to keep pulling his bacon out because he keeps, throwing his nuts around.
Right. So he got arrested, and a trial was set to happen back in like 2000, 2001. And then he delayed it for like 10 fucking years. 10 years! He fucking delayed that shit.
That
Can
takes
you believe
money.
That?
That takes so much cash. Somebody's got to be helping him out at some level.
Right. Well, in the meantime, while he's delaying that, like, I guess newspapers and press started digging around, in the courts and found like a handful of fucking claims against him of sexual like misconduct or what have you against a minor that were settled out of court.
Yeah, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Like a fucking dozen of them. Like he just paid off all these women, and like it was all hush hush, and nobody'd ever heard of it. And the only reason we know about it now is because they were like, well, if he did this video and there were rumors that this was one video of dozens, right? So they're like, okay, so if there's more, has anybody else come forward? This can't be the only case. And they dug into it and they found out, there have been plenty. There have been like dozens of cases that have been settled out of court where they were like, yeah, you touched my daughter. So he has this predatory nature. He's got this like method where he picks on weak girls, right? Who don't have, you know, they're not real close to their family, or they don't have resources or what have you, and he isolates them and he brings them to his home. He was doing this in Atlanta. I guess he doesn't own that home anymore. He got evicted because he doesn't have the revenue that he used to. Anyway, though, he had this Atlanta home, and he had girls that he said some of them have been with him for 5 years, some of them have been with him for like 15. He would keep them in his house. He would make. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was making noises of agreement. Yeah, go ahead.
So he would keep them in the house, and they couldn't move or do anything really without his approval. So like they're throughout the series, they tell different girls are telling different stories, and like one of them's like, they all had to ask if they wanted to eat. He would starve them as punishment if they talked back or they did anything where they broke the rules. He had rules. Couldn't talk or look at anybody unless it was approved. So it was kind of like you're seen but not heard. And just real controlling, real fucking like creepy, isolating, freaky fucking like, what are you doing? To the point where you didn't say anything unless he told you that's what he wanted you to say. You didn't move anywhere or do anything unless he told you that's what he wanted you to do. And most of the time they were just sitting there waiting in bedrooms for him to fucking grab them and take them into another room. And then he'd take two of the girls and fucking, he'd always have his camcorder and videotape them. Like, this is some crazy fucked up shit. Like, this is like a prison. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're treating these women as though they're object. Like, this is literally like, if you don't even care to have them say anything without you putting those words in their mouth, then you're not even, at this point, they're not real to you. These aren't human beings to you. These are just mere objects for you to, I don't know, satisfy yourself with, like play toys.
Yeah, and that's definitely what he was doing, all that kind of stuff, and that is real cultic right there, where a man gets
right. It's fucking really creepy.
Yeah, well, you get him so you can control them. You get a bunch of teenage girls who don't know anything about anything, even if they're in a good position as far as their background in life goes. They're so inexperienced, and you're a millionaire that they see on TV. It's like shooting fish in a barrel, So he just goes to the mall and picks up his new cult victims and has his way with them. It's disgusting, and he's not the only one that does that. It's endemic to the music industry. He's just been called out on it.
Allison, one of our members, one of our listeners, Allison asks, but were they able to leave? And from what I understand, yes, they could technically, but I guess he manipulated and abused them psychologically and emotionally to the point where a lot of them felt like, even if I leave, I have nothing. Where will I go? What will I do? Yeah. And so it keeps a lot of them in place. Like, he wouldn't lock them up or chain them up, but they would be afraid to leave. I guess there's one story of a girl who tried to leave, and they caught her running away, and they picked her back up and they brought her back. But then there's they follow this mom around who had this is another crazy thing. He isolates them to the point where there are parents who would go on the news and say, after the trial and everything, he got wise. He as far as I know, it's been quite a few years since he's messed with any heavy duty underage girls. Now they're like 18 or 19, so that legally, technically, there's nothing they can do. Parents are like, I haven't talked to my daughter in 2 years. For real, there's a girl who's been with him who hasn't seen her parents in like 3 years. They don't know what's going on with her. And that's what he does. And it's crazy. It just fucking, I should start it's hard. I'm totally not the guy who's I'm not a feminist by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm all for objectifying women, but not to this, not like this, not like, you know, I mean, this is different. This is fucked up.
It's up to guys like you and me who see that kind of stuff to say something and stop it if we see it, because that's men abusing their power, and that's wrong. That's horrible. There's a reason you don't see somebody in the thread would just say, "Oh, I wish there was an option for this where men could be bound by some lady as a sex slave." I don't think you'd want that. There's number one, there's a reason that doesn't happen. It's not something women do. Number two, if it did happen, she'd probably be 5 or 6 times your size, and that's frightening. I don't think anybody'd be winning in that situation, because that's not how the human race is put together. So
right. Yeah. Another point to this is that they make fairly clearly is that pretty much all the girls he's messed with and treated this way and manipulated and abused, I guess he would hit them. That was something else too. They would he would abuse them, physically abuse them. He'd smack them and you know, slap them about if they got out of line or talked to somebody or did something he didn't like. And these are young girls. We're not talking about grown women who are like, "Oh, fuck you." Like, you take some 14-year-old girl who, and this isn't just some regular dude off the street. Like, "Oh, you're just a cute guy." This is fucking R. Kelly. This guy's big. Yeah. Who the fuck are you to tell R. Kelly no? Who, if you go and tell somebody R. Kelly's doing this to me, you think anybody's gonna believe you? Like, and for decades, he's been able to fucking prove that no, nobody's gonna buy your bullshit. I can do whatever the fuck I want, and the proof is in the pudding. And like, if you're 14, 16, 18 years old, how are you gonna feel like, well, yeah, I guess, I mean, yes, they believe him now, but they haven't for decades, and I get it. Like, I'm all for accountability. You know, personal accountability. You got to take accountability for your own actions. Why didn't you just, you know, leave? But it's not that easy in this kind of situation.
There's young boys who've had older women abuse them as well, and they don't, you know, they laugh it off. But when you're a teenager, you don't know anything about that sort of thing. That shouldn't be happening. Now it's interesting. Ironically, R. Kelly himself, as an 8-year-old, was molested by an older woman. And
so was his brother.
Yeah.
But by a man, I think.
Oh, I didn't know that part. But that kind of stuff gets into a person's brain and screws them up for life. And so one of the reasons I see this as cultish is the pattern of behavior is continually periodic. It's not like he's just having trouble with a girlfriend who happens to be younger here and there. He's specifically and systematically targeting young girls and controlling them and screwing them up for life. And that sort of thing is core to especially Luciferianism. It's the idea of corruption of innocence. And that's core to the particular kind of occultism you see all throughout the music industry, specifically in Hollywood, which seems to be where a lot of this seems to stem from. So that's all this stuff I'm hearing makes me think he's doing it for a specific reason beyond just perversion. I mean, he's got that in it for sure.
Right. Well, no, this was certainly satisfying some urges, and his covering up of these things and hiding these things is representative of the fact that he knew that what he was doing and how he was behaving and the actions that he was taking were absolutely not okay. He didn't come across like, well, oh, is this wrong? I didn't know this was it. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. You know what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And as Allison said, hey, girls who misrepresent their age, that's bad. But even now, he's getting legitimate 18, 19-year-old girls and doing the same thing to them. I mean, I'm sure he'd love to go younger if he could get away with it. I don't think he cares about their age. I think he wants them to be outside of what society's agreed is an adult young lady. I think that's part of his. Yeah, he's just stuck now.
There are a couple of women who are, you know, what they're calling the survivors, who are like 30 or older and who went through much the same, you know, shit with him, And they talk about how, like, they don't think, yeah, he prefers him younger, but that's not really the thing. The core thing is weak women he can manipulate and control and abuse. That's what he likes. He likes the women he can control. And it doesn't matter if you're 16 or you're 40. And I think that that's probably true. It just happens to be that it's probably easier with younger girls.
Yeah.
You know, you get older, you get, you know, I think most people can attest to the fact that what they were willing to put up with in their in their teens, is not so much the same when they hit 28 or 30. You know, like, nah, I ain't going through that shit again. You know what I mean? And there's a couple of things. Number one, there's a weird thing he did with one of the girls that makes me think, dude, you got a little bit of you swing a little bit, I think, maybe, because he had one girl that he had her cut her hair and dress up like she wouldn't wear makeup. He would have her dress in like baggy shorts and a wife beater. Like, he purposefully would make her look like a boy.
Oh yeah, that's
all the time. And so it's like, what's going on over there? What are you doing with that? Why is that happening? And that was one of the girls. They follow a mother who goes to LA to find her daughter, and that's the daughter, is the one who she goes to this hotel. She tracks her down and goes to her hotel room, and the daughter's like, you gotta go, I'll talk to you later. And you're like, well, she's probably just telling her that, like, because she hasn't at this point, that mom hadn't seen her daughter for like 2 years. And so, you know, she comes out of the hotel, she's crying, and she waits till later, and then her daughter comes out and says, I got my bag packed to get me the hell out of here. And you're like, oh shit. And she bounces with her mom, and and her mom takes her back to Atlanta or wherever the fuck they lived. And I guess she went back to him after that, but then left again on her own, and then stayed with her mom since.
Well,
so
I mean,
it's just real difficult. It's this weird way that, you know, you dig into their minds and their psyche, and you kind of manipulate them to the point where they feel chained internally.
Well, and here's the thing. Here's the smoking gun on all this. No woman's ever got one over on him. If she did, he just pays her to shut up and does it again. B, he's never tried to marry any of these women. That's not on his radar. He's not looking to provide a good home experience and a family or anything. He's just looking to get his and move on. As far as I can tell, this guy, he is the poster child for what's wrong in the music industry, and that's that so much of this nasty sort of perverted sex crap totally defines the artists who are put on a pedestal, and that I think that's by design. You know, the guys who don't make it conventionally, they don't tend to have those sorts of stories about them. You know, there's plenty of artists you don't hear. I mean, I'm sure Willie Nelson bounced around a bit, but you don't hear anything about it. You know, Elvis Presley, he married one gal. That was it. Elvis, unless, you know, it's hard to believe the guy only had sex with one woman, but that's apparently the official line on that. So there's all sorts of, I don't know. I think all this smoking gun is that this cat was really a nasty dude using his power to get what he wants.
Well, and part of the issue is that they say every girl he's done this to, every woman that he's abused or manipulated throughout these years, they've all been black. And
oh man,
all of them. Not a single white girl in the bunch. I think there was one Hispanic girl. There were probably more, but they're out of the survivors in the series. There was this one that they showed, and at some point they talk about, like, they have some celebrities.
Get it. And now
who, hey Joe, what's going on, man?
Oh. I can't figure out this goddamn mute thing's not working. Muting itself. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, that's all right, man. No, come join us for a conversation. That's cool. So they talk about how if he had done this to white women, this wouldn't have, this would be a totally different story. He'd never have gotten away with it. I couldn't help but cringe at that because I felt like my initial reaction to that statement was, here we go.
It
We're
sounds
not even
like somebody.
Whitey isn't even involved in this shit.
Yeah.
This is a black dude and black women and black community and black culture, and we have nothing to do with it. And you're still fucking throwing in the, well, if Whitey had fucking, like, no. You don't get to fucking, we got nothing to do with this. That's bullshit. Don't fucking even try and blame us for any of this shit. That's fucked up. And that's kind of that's the reaction I had to that when they said that.
That's a good reaction. That is the correct reaction, I believe.
Now, taking a step back from that, I can't help but think that there's some legitimacy to that. I think that maybe if he had tried this on some white girls, that it would have made it more prominent and more of a spectacle. Here's the thing. I think they're right in the fact that black women are viewed as more disposable or more easily discarded. But I don't think that's because of Whitey. I think that's their own fucking culture doing that. You guys do that.
That's a pretty interesting argument, and I think you got a good point there. That is
because if it was such a big spectacle, how come? They talk a lot about how when it came out, when he was arrested, and when they were doing a trial date, when all that first started back in 2000, 2001, and then again when the trial finally started, and he'd go to court, all these fans are outside in support of him, and they'd show this footage of girl after girl after girl, and just crowds of people going, R. Kelly, free R. Kelly, and talking mad like these are just people trying to take him down, trying to bring a black man down. Bitch, there's no white people involved in this. Like, so the only people trying to bring him down are other blacks, but you're not letting him because you're not believing in your own shit. Like you're not policing your own, and that's, I don't know, that's kind of how I see it. Did I lose everybody?
No, I'm still here.
Oh.
You're good.
Yeah, I was just waiting for you to take a breath. I was like, he'll breathe soon.
No, yeah. So, I mean, do you see what I'm talking about, though? Do you think that that's right?
I think that a lot of what we see in terms of virtue signaling social justice outrage is a bunch of white people who are themselves closeted racists and actually trying to make themselves feel better by saying, oh, look, I'm helping you out by pointing out what we've done. I'm not one of the bad guys. That's the most racist thing you can do. It's like that guy, Tahini or whatever, whose novel got published because he was black and talking political rather than because it was qualitative. And some professor, it's in Tucker Carlson's Ship of Fools. Some professor says, man, and he was a black professor. He says, it is more racist that you publish this crap just because the guy's black than that you didn't, because
right.
It was just because it fit that social justice warrior niche, that certain spot where they are able to pat themselves on the back for being racially sensitive. And it's all BS. I mean, that book's very interesting. It talks about, there's another place where it happens where, because an ecological department in San Francisco is interested in a global environmental preservation, what they do is they take away the garbage cans on the ocean beach, and now the garbage piles up. And the reason is they were trying to save money and time because there was too much time spent emptying the trash cans. So the ecological agency took the trash cans from the beach and people threw it on the beach, and they didn't save it. It's ridiculous. Then there's
ridiculous.
You're in the West Coast, right? The plastic bags are 5 to 25 cents depending on which store you go to.
Yeah.
Well,
they're like 10 cents or 15 cents.
Depends on where you go. Sometimes they get you for 25. What the hobos used to do, and we know it's a problem out there, they will poop in the bag and throw the bag in the dumpster. But now the bag, 4 bags is the cost of 2 blunts. 4 bags is too much money to spend. So what do they just poop in the street? Turns out hepatitis A comes from people pooping in the streets and being in close contact from it. And those hobos are walking into Starbucks to poop now. So what happens? You get rid of plastic bags to help the critters in the ocean. Now everybody's got hepatitis A because the hobos are pooping in the street. It's A. That's true though. I mean, there are absolutely.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I've never understood why there wasn't more of a push to solve that by making more public bathrooms. Like it's that simple.
It is. It is pretty simple.
Part of the problem with these homeless, because we've got plenty of homeless in California. And like anybody, they have to go to the bathroom. They got to piss and shit. And most places view these people as indigents or undesirables, and they don't want them in their stores. They don't want them wherever, so they either say, our bathrooms are for customers only, or they make it so you have to pay 50 cents to get into the bathroom, or they flat out say, like, we don't have a bathroom. You can't go to the bathroom here. So you make it hard for these people to shit and piss. All right. And it's their right as a business owner to determine who they give business to and who they don't, who they allow in their store. I don't want to take that away from them at all. But if you're going to make it hard for them to piss and shit in bathrooms that are accessible to the regular people, to regular folks, then give them access to bathroom facilities anybody can use, public bathrooms. Make more of them. And then you won't have people pissing and shitting in the streets, because that's what they...
Yeah. Well,
that's why they're doing it. They have nowhere else to go.
You probably still will, to be honest, because a lot of people, unless you had a shit ton of them, until you've had a shit ton of, the city of Austin has been flirting with this whole idea of putting up some toilets for the homeless people. And it's an ungodly amount of money that they would be spending every year just for like 3 toilets for the entire city. What? It's insane. Yeah, you wouldn't believe how much. Like, there's John Stossel did a report on. John Stossel did a report on how New York City built a new public restroom in one of their parks, right? And it's small. It's not very big. And it cost like $2.5 million because that's what happens when because that's what happens when government gets involved. They can't do anything right, and everything costs way more than it should, and it'll cost a fuck ton to keep it going. And with the amount of homeless there are in California, holy shit, it would cost probably, I can't even imagine how much money it would cost. But there's one reason that it's probably, and plus, if you're homeless, I mean, are you really, unless you're like living right next to the toilet, why not just shit in the street?
Yeah, honestly. I mean, you're homeless. What are they gonna do?
Right?
They're just gonna tell you to move. That's it.
Exactly.
They're not gonna lock you up. I mean, if you poop in the street and go to jail, that's 3 hots and a cot. You just got rewarded. That's incentive.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it's a joke, but it's true. So the issue is not how do we serve an indigent population. The issue is how do we reduce an indigent population. And the best way, I think, is to get the hell rid of all these taxes and social programs. Let small business thrive. But that's just my uber libertarian coming out.
No. I definitely think that there's a legitimate argument to be made that the welfare state does not help people as much as create a dependency in these people. Yeah. And like they're not lifted up by it, but instead become complacent and lazy and decide, well, I don't have to work because this stuff is provided to me. I don't have to support myself because I'm being supported. And I think that's a valid. I think that's true.
There should not be 3 generations that are on welfare. That's unacceptable. You know?
Yeah, I totally agree.
Like
is
in
it
the
three
same
generations
family.
on welfare?
Yeah, we are into third generational welfare where the father and mother had it, their kids had it, and their kids' were on it. That exists in this country, and that is inexcusable. That is facilitating the issue. That's not fixing anything.
Yeah. No,
I went on food stamps for 6 months once, and I quit because I was
that's
able.
What you're supposed to do. You're supposed to quit.
Yeah, when I was able to technically live without them when I went on them, but it was a little more difficult. So I was using it sort of to ease the burden. And I thought, man, I'm not going to be one of these guys who's just leeching on the system because that's what everybody does. I mean, now I could have justified it. I could have said, you know what? Everybody does it anyway, and my taxes are going to it. Why not? But it's like, well, then what about that poor actual mom who's been R. Kelly'd and has a baby, and and she's been literally pissed on. The poor woman needs some food. I mean, what if I accidentally knocked her out of the bracket? So I pulled out, and I think it was a good decision because I'll tell you what. When I was on it, the next thing I did.
I think it's always a good decision to pull out.
Oh yes, It's just yeah. It increases your spread of potentiality. We'll leave it at that.
It definitely increases your spread. Get a good spread. So, yeah. I think I definitely think that the thing with R. Kelly right now, there's a movement called #mute R. Kelly, and there's a whole movement of women who are trying to get his shows canceled and get radio stations to stop playing his music. And I think Georgia, I just heard, is prosecuting him again based on this series. So normally I'm totally against this kind of movement when it's just a one-off. Somebody does something bad and it's like, all right, the punishment should fit the crime. You can't destroy their life. Like Louis C.K. I'm against what they did to Louis C.K. and I'm against what they're doing to him right now because I think he paid his dues. He fucking gave up a year of his life and his earnings. What more do you want? He can't ever come back. He can't ever change. He can't ever be fucking,
Meanwhile,
like, all right, I made a mistake.
See, and that's what goes into it with me. It's like there's people on the chopping block. Like the R. Kellys get to do it for 19 years, but Louis C.K., masturbates in bad taste. It's just he's done. He's done for. Meanwhile, R. Kelly's peeing on bitches. It's ridiculous.
He's fucking 14-year-olds. He's got women in his he's got a sex cult in his fucking house. And this dude's fine?
Yeah, well, and Allison just brought up a good point. Kavanaugh, there's not even any evidence of anything whatever, and they treat him like the devil's rectum. But R. Kelly's out there just whipping bitches in the closet. I mean, it's so two-faced and double-sided. If you don't see it, you're either part of the problem or you're so brainwashed there ain't no brain left up in that head. That's right. People have got to see this. They've got to see it.
So and that's the thing. Normally I'm against this kind of thing, but in this case with R. Kelly, with decades of fucking abuse and what I consider to be pretty solid evidence, like it's hard to. I'm sorry. Like in that video, at one point somebody goes, "Yo, hey Kels, the phone's for you." And he fucking says it's not him. They fucking call him out, dude. Yo, Kels. And he goes, "All right, I'll get it in a minute," and then goes back to eating this girl's pussy. Like, it's just fucking ridiculous. Like, that's not you. That's really not you.
Man, there's some guy named Kels. There's some guy named Kels who look like me. There's some guy named Kels.
Oh, that's another thing. He tried to throw his younger brother under the bus and said, "Nah, man, it could have been him." His fucking defense, R. Kelly's defense team tried to say that, and so his younger brother. Now they're estranged because his younger brother went out on fucking radio stations and said, "Nah, he's a fucking pedophile. This dude's fucking doing this and that and the other thing," and just fucking talked mad shit on R. Kelly. Like
That's pretty damn. Nobody ever did that about Kavanaugh except a couple of gals who conveniently popped up out of nowhere after he went through a round of questioning from the Democrats. It was a hit piece on that dude. R. Kelly, totally. There's so much. The girl who he micturated upon, to quote The Big Lebowski, was born in '86. Okay, so she was 16 in 2002. A year after, I believe, or was it 2003? Either way, she wasn't 18 till 2004, and it all went down in 2001, 2002. I was in high school. Dave Chappelle did a whole joke thing on it. Might have been part of the that he was hilarious with that. So yeah.
Oh my God.
If anybody should be a casualty of the Me Too, it should be the actual abusers. That's the biggest. There's a smoking gun that Me Too thing isn't necessarily what it's cracked up to be, because the abusers, they just keep on juking and jiving, just peeing on bitches in the closet. It's insane,
right? I totally agree.
It ain't natural.
So, we've gone through, and I didn't expect that particular topic to be as fruitful as it was. We've gone through more than an hour on R. Kelly alone. Thank you, R. Kelly. That was an enjoyable conversation. Thank you for being on bitches so that we can talk about it for an hour. See, black girls' lives do matter, because otherwise, what would us white folk have to talk about? No, but for real, I wanted to talk about Vice, but I want to put that off for now. I want to talk about you, man. Like, you're a comedian. How long you been doing that?
I started in 2011 in Fort Collins, Colorado. I guess when I really think back on it, I've been telling jokes my whole life. I've always been interested in humor, and I thought it would be fun to do stand-up, but I never thought I would do it. I almost backdoored in. I almost stumbled into it, honestly. But I started in 2011, and I've been at it as hard as I can ever since. It's very difficult. You have to work multiple jobs to do stand-up comedy, because it's not going to pay for you. 1 month, I've made over $2,000 since 2011. I've had a few other months that come close. I'm lucky if I get a few $100s a month here and there. And I've been on national TV twice. I've been on America's Got Talent and on season 2, episode 2 of a reality show called It Takes a Church. It was ridiculous.
Oh, wow. So It Takes a Church.
Yeah.
Is that a comedy thing? I've never heard of it.
My episode was pretty comedic. They cut out my favorite part. I won the game with the little bachelorette on the show, and the prize was I got to spend 10 minutes with her one-on-one, not a second of which aired, probably because she said, I like Alanis Morissette, and I said, gag me with a spoon, but I don't know. So that was interesting. True. That's true. Oh, I'm pretty funny, Allison. I'm Google French accent AGT, and then on the sidebar, it'll have some of my YouTube channel videos, and I got some jokes on there. I do this character with an accordion and an eye patch. I talk like this and tell a bunch of ridiculous one-liners. Like, I was in San Francisco recently. I saw a sign on the billboard that said "Art for AIDS." I thought that's not a very fair trade. But it does describe San Francisco. Anyway, so I've got a bunch of one-liners like that, and I've got a 40-minute clean set and a 70-minute adult set on my page, and I've got an album that's supposed to be coming out through a site called McGroove, and I've put some musical albums through them, and they're taking their sweet time processing my comedy album, so I haven't been able to pimp it yet, but it's going to be called I'm From Wyoming, obviously, and I'm just waiting on it to come out on there so I can send it around. But yeah, I've been doing it a minute.
Well, Sativa's in Wyoming.
Sativa? Yeah, I hear you.
Whereabouts in Wyoming are you? Whereabouts are you? Cheyenne. Okay. All right. Yep. Well, I'm in Fort Collins presently. I'm heading to Vegas tomorrow morning, and then to LA after that, and then I'm going to stay in LA for a while. But I'm from Gillette originally, and
shit, nice.
Yeah, I went to I only went to Cheyenne a little bit when I was in speech and debate. We went to LCCC or whatever it's called for one of the meetings, the college down there. So that's about all I know of Cheyenne. That and me and my buddy Reese went to go see Seinfeld down there once. He showed up in Cheyenne for some reason. Yeah, I think he was challenging himself. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Gillette to Cheyenne, really the big difference is we have a little bit less meth. We're more into our heroin these days.
Ah, yes.
That's the difference, really.
Gillette's a methy place. It's methed up. You know, they've got ice there, and then the winter comes.
Yep. Facts. They are always messing around.
But it's getting a little better. A lot of that was exacerbated in the last 8 years because of the administration previous to the current one laying off a lot of the energy people. And of course, out on those coal rigs, you're going to be those oil rigs, you're going to be out there for sometimes 48 hours at a stretch. So already there's a little bit of a upper culture. Now all these guys are laid off. They got to get industrious, go in their garage, snort some meth, and build some shit. So that's sadly that was going on for a while. Hopefully that switches and it's not like that in the near future.
Yeah, like I said, the biggest thing in fact, Cheyenne, you don't hear nearly as much about meth busts and shit like that here anymore. Oh, right now, heroin has swung into Cheyenne in a very serious way right now.
Oh, that's sad.
Like, it is horrifying. Horrifying.
A friend of mine.
You know, I've heard in this country that we have an epidemic of like an opiate epidemic. That's what I've heard.
Oh, I believe it. Looking at San Francisco, I mean, oh my gosh, yeah. I think you're accurate there.
Well, I mean, you got to think about it. I don't know when the last time any of you went to seek some kind of health care was for an injury. All they want to do is cram you full of pain pills. And I'm like, well, gee, I wonder how we ended up with the fucking opiate crisis. Literally, my sister went in. She had tweaked her back. And, you know, she just basically wanted to go get it checked out, make sure she's okay. And they wrote her prescriptions for literally 2 different opiates. And we're like, all right, here you go. Like, is my back okay? Like, just some Tylenol would deal with it. Just let me know that I'm okay. And that's it, especially here at Cheyenne Regional Medical Center. That is all they want to do is jack you full of pills. Well, I wonder how we got here, guys.
It's true, and it's sad, and it shouldn't be that way. But none of my comedy involves me doing methamphetamine. So I avoid.
That's fucking boring.
Then are you really from Wyoming then? I mean, honestly.
Well,
I used to be addicted to the stuff back in the day, so
it's methy. Like it'll get you.
It's very it's a hell of a drug.
It's a hell of a drug. Yeah, no, that's not my. I'm on the greener side of things myself, but yeah, my comedy's very. I'd say if you were going to describe my comedy, it'd be like somebody took Steve Martin and Mitch Hedberg and put them into the chamber from The Fly with Weird Al Yankovic, like all 3 together. and what came out is this sort of limb-filled, slimy, pun-ridden creature that is sometimes funny and sometimes you laugh at it because otherwise you'd have to cry. And that's that's
so has your comedy always been like mostly one-liners like that with a character? It reminds me of some of the old school guys, like you mentioned Hedberg. Stephen Wright is who comes to mind. I love Stephen, always have.
Yeah, I see. There's a lot of mostly it has been one-liners. Was that a belch or a motorcycle?
I don't know what that was. Was that a
Could have been either one. I mean, the technology.
It wasn't me.
There's a Japanese car that uses defecation as fuel, and it's just your driver's seat's also a toilet. Not practical, but A for imagination, even though that's spelled with an I. Point being, I do a lot of one-liners. I do. I've got some character stuff, but it's mostly one-liners and a few little stories here and there.
Okay. So what was it always your goal when you got involved in stand-up comedy? Was it did you go in knowing that you were going to do a character, or is that something that developed later?
Well, I got my bachelor's degree in theater, and I was going to go out to LA after I paid off my debt at the coal mine in Wyoming and be an actor. And thank God I didn't do that. I'd ended up in porn because that's just what happened. That's a fact, though. All these Midwesterners, they come out without a plan. They end up in porn or whatever. It's horrible. What I did do is a little better. What happened is I started doing comedy in 2011 after I searched for it, failed to find it, had a DUI after a failed relationship, and turned out the comedy was just in my own backyard, a place I'd even been to a couple times. It's just comedians, especially at the level where we all start, have so little facility for marketing that nobody knows what's going on. You got to meet other comics and they got to tell you, it's so underground. So anyway, I finally found this thing and I went to it and I watched what they did and I thought, A, I can do that, and B, I can bring my theater training to bear. I can use what I got my degree in. So I came out and I pretended to be from Scotland. I do a great Scotland sort of brogue. I'm able to do it at the drop of a hat. It's one of my strongest dialects, actually. I do them all. Scotland's my favourite.
That's great.
There's a lot of different ways to do it, too. Like, you got real fast talk at the front, like, what's his name in that movie? Snatch, who gets his head stuck in the window with Bluetooth Tony and gets dragged along by the sidewalk, and you can't understand words coming out of his mouth. Or you can say your thing. You didn't do that.
That's you even got down that whole, like, when they get going and you just can't fucking understand them after a while, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
Thank you much. Good Lord gave me a gift with the voices there. But I did that for a while, and what happened was there was another guy headlining as a fake Scotsman. I didn't know he was fake when I met him. It took me about
you were doing the same act. You're like, son of a bitch.
Kind of, yeah. I had about 15 to 20 minutes as this character, and then I ran into this dude who was headlining with it, and, well, that trumps me. That blows me right out of the water. So I had to pivot and become French accent, and there's a whole story with that, but French accent tells a lot of the same jokes, but with an over-the-top French character, and I play an accordion, which allows me to go into music, and there's a strong Steve Martin influence because I got to play a character called Gaston in he's Steve Martin's Picasso at the Lapin Agile, and that was a pretty fun play, but that sort of French, stereotypical, I chase the ladies, I'm a dirty Frenchman. That sort of my persona.
You ever see that? What's that one episode of The Simpsons where she's, I think Lisa's in class and she's learning French and she did something and she's running out of the class and all the kids are laughing and the French teacher goes, en français, and all the kids stop laughing and they pick it up again but with like a French accent. They
That's brilliant. Oh, that's too funny. That's too funny. I like that.
You play the accordion, huh?
Well, I play piano. I mess around on the accordion to comedic effect, and I use it to play some simple melodies that I can sing parody lyrics to. And I'll use it as a punctuation as well. There's a slightly hypnotic quality I've realized to my acts that is half intentional because there's such a thing as a punchline indicator. And that's when you do or say something, you make an expression. Rodney Dangerfield bugs his eyes out at you. Sometimes Ron White will take a sip from his drink, Mitch Hedberg, he'd laugh a little bit. These are called punchline indicators, and they're a subconscious sort of tick that can clue the crowd into, it's time to laugh now. And a lot of good comics have them. I don't try and make my act around those, but I try and remember that sort of psychological archetypical knowledge. And the accordion allows me to do that to a degree because I'm playing a melody, kind of like Mitch Hedberg's bass. I'm playing a melody throughout my act, and then I stop on a punchline, and people will laugh. If they don't get it, then I make a self-deprecating joke or try and call somebody out in the audience. I fight for that laugh, and then I move on to the next one or acknowledge, hey, that joke sucked. Well, I'm not telling that again or something. So the accordion, it's got multiple functions.
Okay. It's curious. It's really interesting only because it's been a while that I've seen anybody really do that kind of act that you're talking about. I mean, I remember that being pretty prevalent. A lot of guys, there was the, in the 90s, you had that one guy who was, God, I wish I could remember his name. He's a comedy magician. And he would do jokes like he'd have this card. He'd do a card trick and he'd go, all right, pick a card. And somebody would pull a card and he'd go, all right, is this your card? And they'd go, no. And he'd go, it would have been cool though, huh? Would have been cool if it was.
Yeah.
And you had the two guys who played guitar, and they'd sing, songs. There were a bunch of different musician comedians, but a lot of that, like, not prop style comedy, but just accents and characters and things like that just kind of fell to the wayside since then.
Well, what's happening is the SJWs are killing comedy because they're finding all humor subjects as victimized classes of people, when in reality what humor does is it allows us all to laugh at our ludicrous situation as human beings. So instead of recognizing that fundamental truth, the SJW types are trying to take a subversive tack on it and demonize anybody who notices anything true. That's when you take away all the gloss, that's what's going on. They try and talk about not punching down, but they punch down anybody who disagrees with them as hard as they can. And it's very sarcastic. It's very trendy. It's very virtue signal rich. And that is characterizing modern comedy, and it's killing it because people don't enjoy that, so they don't go to the shows. So the shows don't make the money they used to. So even though there's a good old boys club that has brought a lot of these mediocre at best comedians to the top of the heap, it's a house of cards. It's a empty building in the breeze. It's glass house and everybody's throwing rocks, and it's crumbling down. What the hipster alt comic movement of today is the same thing as in the 1980s when you had a comedian say, I just flew in from New York and boy, my arm's tired. First time he told that joke, hilarious, but soon it became endemic of the 80s scene. It became hack. Now you ever hear a joke like that, it's total garbage. Well,
your eyes.
And today, the hipster alt scene is exactly that, and 90% of them do not realize it. So what'll happen, I think, is there's going to be a huge bust, and the people that weren't building their comedy around that to begin with are going to be all that's left for a while. But I don't know.
So let me ask you, you say you started in 2011. When did you notice the SJW movement affecting comedy?
Well,
when did you start to see that causing an effect for you or in your environment comedically?
I was able to do about until 2000, probably the end of 2013. I didn't concern myself with what anybody thought of my jokes as much. Around the end of 2013 into 2014, the atmosphere sort of changed a little. But for the most part, my character is built to sort of deflect that by default. Because I'm a caricature of what the SJWs despise, and a lot of them don't realize in a certain way I'm satirizing their perspective. Sometimes it'll appear as though I'm playing along when I'm not, and it's sneaky that way, and that's by design. I got a degree in theater in 2008, and I'm from Wyoming. So when I got into go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
When I started in theater, it was in Wyoming. That was the most liberal, leftist, progressivist spot in the state. I was at ground zero doing theater in Casper, Wyoming. That's where I got my associate's degree. So from the beginning, that was probably the most free I've been around progressives, because they were metered by their audience, which was Wyoming conservatives. So when the theater department in Casper had to put on a show, they had to be oblique about their progressivist agenda, or they would lose their meal ticket and they wouldn't be able to perform. So they'd put on classic Broadway musicals that everybody knew, and they'd sprinkle in a subversive element, like I did Hamlet, but it was a postmodern Hamlet. So all the costume design was Blade Runner. Even though that's not what Shakespeare was doing in that play or anything, that's how they did their thing. Well, then I go to Iowa, which is a school that only has shows for alumni and students, and they have no audience that they must cater to. And in Iowa, this is where I really noticed it. I was actually singled out a couple of times just because I didn't agree with the ideology of the school I was going to. I was actually blackballed from the mainstream of the theater department and only got to do student productions throughout my graduating year.
Why were you blackballed?
I didn't want to sit through Hedwig and the Angry Inch. When he jerks off the missionary, I left. I just didn't want to watch that. That's not something I'm into. And they were making it required viewing material for the musical theater history class we were in. And I didn't make a scene. I sat through it as long as I could. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna leave. I don't want to think about that stuff. That's gross to me. So I left, and the professor of the course the next day, because that's what happened. But the professor of the course, he said, I found it extraordinarily, because he said extraordinarily, concerning this notion that you would be offended by anything in Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Would you mind talking with me in the class about this? And so they held a roundtable discussion.
He called you out in class?
In front of the whole class, which was mostly my my student body of theater. And I just held my, and I lost the argument, but I held my ground and I just went with it and I didn't back down. And that was
this is the University of Iowa?
This is Cornell College, which is between, so there's Iowa City, there's Cornell, and then there's Cedar Rapids. Cedar Rapids is 40 miles north of Iowa City. Cornell is 20 miles south of Cedar Rapids, 20 miles north of Iowa City. Smack dab in the middle. It's kind of a private institution, but not. It's the Sam's Club Cornell University. That's really what it is. And they do a neat thing where they do one class at a time, where you do
Is
3.5.
Do you guys have that there?
Sam's Club in Wyoming?
Yeah, wherever. Yeah.
Well, I know they have it in LA. I think they have a few in Wyoming. I'm not sure.
I don't think Sam's Club's still a thing out here. That's why I was curious if it was still maybe out in the rest of the world. We have
a Sam's Club in Cheyenne.
Costco killed Sam's Club over here.
Yeah, we have.
You do, yeah. Come to think of it, I haven't seen any Sam's Club in LA. I have seen a few Walmarts, but not many.
I'm sorry, yeah, I didn't mean to sidetrack your fucking. You were so on cue, man. I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good. That was basically the point I was making. Cornell College has a one course at a time thing, which for 3.5 weeks you do one course, and then you do 4 hours of that a day, and then you get a 5-day weekend, and you get the next one. You get 9 full course credits a year, so that's 36 by the end of 4 years, and you can take electives. And so it's a kind of hippy dippy school. I don't know. I got a scholarship there for theater. I was trying to get a BA in theater. I got it. I paid it off at the coal mines. I'm good. I don't have a lot of complaints, but they did. As far as blackballing in comedy, as far as SJW, I knew it was there before I started doing comedy. So when I started doing comedy, I had the idea I'm going to have to deflect against this. That was why I started with the Scottish character, because I thought I could get across conservative concepts to a liberal audience through the lens of a Scotsman who would have those views naturally, and therefore they'd be excusable. And then I got that derailed.
There's a method to that. Okay.
Yeah, and then that was derailed, so I sort of reworked it into a French character. And how the French guy came about, that'll take me 15 minutes to tell, but I think it was a godsend, because it was crazy. But anyway, so I started doing that, and my whole gag at the beginning is I want to make people on the far left laugh while I'm doing conservative concepts, but I don't want to alienate them, because I hate it when leftist progressive comedians work and do their damnedest to alienate me, which has happened. Like David Cross, I love most of his comedy, but then he starts preaching. You know what I mean?
Yes, I love David Cross, but I fucking hate that he's very much an activist.
Yeah,
and he's very much like, if you don't share these views, fuck you. And it's a little rough, because I fucking hate that, because I love him so much.
Yeah, every movie he's in, I love him. Arrested Development, I could watch Tobias for hours. I love David, but whenever I listen to his comedy, I either have to skip parts or I have to stop listening, and that irritates me. So I don't want to do that to an audience from the leftist perspective. I loved him, but then he started telling me how to save my soul. Well, I'd like to tell you that, but I don't want to alienate you. So I'm oblique about it, and I try and make my act about making you laugh first and putting in messages second. And that's what Monty Python did, and everybody likes them on the left and the right. So I just try because if you actually watch Monty Python, not all of them, the fish slapping sketch is just glorious silliness. but a lot of their sketches have a subversive, progressive, liberal, political ideal hidden in there somewhere. But you can laugh regardless of whether or not you agree, and that's what.
But I have to say though that their brand of progressivism or liberalism is very different from what is considered progressive and liberal today.
That's true. They were anti-fascist, and
those
now
are not the same things. I mean, I've heard Cleese. I've heard Cleese talk about how he disagrees with what SCWs are doing.
Offends me. Yeah, I saw that video, and that's the thing. They've even forgotten their roots because the whole Antifa movement is ironically fascist. They don't realize it, but they're as fascist as that which they're against. And that's the whole progressive. All the progressives who aren't Antifa wish they could. They look at Antifa as saints. I've argued against Antifa with some of these cats, and they're like, Antifa are fighting fascism. I'm like, they're not at all.
They are the fascists. Like they're the brown shirts. I don't know how anybody could see that as how anybody could see otherwise. And it's willful ignorance or blindness to that. To believe that just because you call yourself something, you are that thing. Like, I can call myself a fucking female black lawyer because I fucking had a dream that I was one. It doesn't make me one. I'm not. I don't know anything about law. I'm not black. I don't have a vagina. You can't just say it. And it comes true. You can't.
You became Bill Burr for like 10 seconds there. That was great. You're telling me you're not Rachel Dolezal? You're not. Is that what you're telling me? Well, this whole time I've been under a misconception, and it's so true though, because the problem that is destroying the progressivist movement right now, thank God, is the fact that they have made it so that anything someone claims by their own rules, they kind of have to legitimize it, even though it's total garbage. And that's going to take them out, because eventually people are going to start saying, okay, wait, these are a bunch of Looney Tunes. And I hope it happens sooner than later. I've heard talk in LA of a sea change, and I hope that's true. I've seen a little bit of it. It doesn't seem to be affecting the mainstream media outlets, but because they're so authoritarian, it is forcing entertainers to seek other ways of reaching people. And that's going to just steadily take away the power of the mainstream until it's a husk that crumbles on itself. I so hope that happens.
Benjamin Owen is one of those who, he takes to YouTube a lot to get his message out. I love the guy. I really do. I think he's phenomenal. I think he's still in that stage of like polishing perfecting his skill, sharpening his blade, as it were. But there's so much talent there, and I think he's. When you see the little bits of him on stage, he can be phenomenal. So amazing, and he really is. But he gets a little opinionated, and he gets a little crazy, and I think sometimes I feel like he jumps the gun on people sometimes. I don't know. Like he gets really angry at Joe Rogan, and he fucking he'll talk mad shit. It's just like, whoa, dude, you're kind of alienating yourself by doing that. I don't know if that's really the route I would go. I mean, he's got balls, but give him that.
He's got balls, and I see the point that he's making, but I think that more tact would be
absolutely.
It'd be advice. Right. And that's the thing, because it's hard for me to know, because what I found out about tact is that sometimes being tactful is definitely what you must do. Sometimes being shocking and outrageous is what you must do. There's a balance, and it's different per situation.
Time and place.
There's a time and place, and I struggle with the time and place. I've got good timing.
Well, right. That's comedy, baby. Timing. It's all about the timing.
I've got the timing down. Wonderful, good stuff. Words coming out of the mouth. I'm walking all over the place with these jokes. But the place, man, nursing homes, not a savvy gig.
Oh, wow.
Right?
You don't say.
Oh, I do.
That's a really good. That's a fucking good walking. That's a really. Oh God, who's that? Who's that comedian who's also an actor who does a good walking?
I think it's Kevin Nealon. Kevin Nealon, I think, is the one. He says.
Did you ever see Indian Summer?
I did not. No.
Oh fuck, that's kind of an older movie.
Are you thinking Jay Moore?
No, I like Jay, but no, not Jay. You've seen Usual Suspects, right?
Yeah, most of
the
it.
The shorter guy.
Oh, I'm pretty sure that's Kevin Nealon. I think that's Kevin Nealon.
Is that Kevin Nealon? Maybe I just didn't know his name.
Because what he says is the secret to a good walk-in is no two things are connected in his head. so he's like, hey, how you doing? My shoes are untied. You know, and he does a bunch of one-liners like that, and they're brilliant. And
somebody tells a story about his car. Your car, it's alive. Chase me.
Yeah, that's the one. That's Kevin Nealon. That's who that is.
Okay, all right. I love that guy. I think he's hilarious.
You know how you do a good. You know how you do a good Ray Romano.
How do you do a good Ray? How do you tell me?
Here's how I do it. I just do Kermit the Frog doing his impression of Christopher Walken. Oh, ooh. It might actually. It might actually
be Christopher Walken.
It might be Kevin Pollak. It might be Kevin Pollak. I could have had it backwards.
Oh yeah, Kevin Pollak. That's his fucking name.
Nealon's the tall one. That's I messed it up. But yeah, those are the. You're right. You're right. It was Pollak. Pollak, not Nealon.
It is Pollak. Yep. Now I want to take us back. I want to rewind a bit because I didn't want to take us off course. We were on a path, but I'm going to digress a bit. Rewind back to something you said. Our generous host who is recording us tonight had a question.
Yes.
I want to be able to post that or present that to you. You brought up how you fight for each joke. Is that how you approach your act? Is there any pivot room, as in reacting to the crowd and altering the routine, or is the routine very strict?
As I've gone forward, I've had to change things. Now, you need to be able to totally pivot as the energy of the room demands, and that's very difficult to do initially. Like you'll stumble into good crowd work accidentally at the beginning, and I'm just getting to the point now where I can actually rely to a certain extent on my crowd work abilities. That's what we call that. So what happens is I learn my material backwards so that if I go off script, it doesn't throw me off. So
can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that?
Well, so Kermit Romano, that's a bit I do. And I could just work it into the conversation just like I came up with it on the spot. But that's a bit I do. And so
that's very good.
Thank you much. Yeah, and I altered it a bit for this conversation just because we're having a conversation. I'm not on stage. When I'm on stage, what I'll do is I'll write out 5 minutes by the second. So I'll have art for AIDS. I did that joke earlier on this broadcast. That's about 10 seconds. And then I'll have semicolon. I think a midget's large intestine should be called a semicolon. And I play the chorus. You know, that's 5 seconds right there. So that's 15 seconds. Now, if I tell the one joke and then the other and then 20 seconds of Kermit Romano, I may have the audience laugh. I may hear a goofy laugh. I may see a girl put her hands in front of her face. Any of these things are worth calling out to make a connection with the audience. Or I might get heckled, in which case I've got a few pat responses. But I don't try and rely on those because if you rely on pat responses, when you find somebody who doesn't, then they run over you. So you got to be sort of in the moment there. And sometimes you're going to end up with egg on your face. That's just what happens in comedy. But starting
that's how you learn. There's no real other way to learn except to get out there and fall.
That's right. Well, and starting out, I would write down my bits, and I wasn't that great at crowd work. I just yell at the crowd basically. Now I write down 5 minutes of bits, and I maybe get to 3 minutes of them between. I'll usually have my opener, closer, and middle bit figured out, and then some stuff I want to do between there. But the stuff on the in-between almost always gets knocked out of whack because I got to deal with something in the crowd. And that actually ends up being a better show. it's easier to make people laugh with crowd work because everybody immediately gets the joke because they can see it playing out in front of them. It's harder to get the crowd on your side. So you got to get the crowd on your side if crowd work ain't going to work. And sometimes you can alienate them if you're trying too hard. So it's a balance. It's like surfing. You got to catch that wave, and then once you caught it, you just go right down that half pipe.
You know, I'm curious. I have a question regarding what we're talking about here, crowd work. As a musician, because I've done plenty of stage work, but as a musician, never as a stand-up comedian. But I've always found that the way to grab an audience is like you have to control them. I always found that you cannot rely on the audience to give you the energy. You can't follow the audience's energy. You have to grab and direct the audience's energy and control them and force them to look at you and pay attention to you and say, this is the energy level you need to have. And then, kind of put that on them, and then they give that back to you. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that's exactly right.
Is that something that you feel does that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Is that
also something that you feel works in comedy?
It's fundamental to comedy because you have to read a crowd, and they will reflect the energy you bring on stage, just like you said. I also have a background in music myself. Now, I didn't get as far with that as I'd like to because
Same.
I don't. But I played on stage, and you do have to do that. I learned it more in theater than with music because in theater you do the same thing night after night, and the energy you brought on stage would determine the reaction the crowd had, and that would determine how much they. So with comedy, what happens is a lot of these new guys think they're Stephen Wright. They don't realize Stephen Wright is like a soloist playing a melody that on its own. Like Stephen Wright has high energy. It looks low energy because he's not jumping all over the stage, but every word, every action, every move is full of energy. And the thing is with comedy, whether the energy is Dane Cook, acting like he's a snake on stage, or whether it's Mitch Hedberg and who I just said, his name escapes me for a second for whatever reason. I just said him. He's your buddy, Stephen Wright. Whether it's either of those guys who are a little bit lower energy in appearance, there's a lot of energy there. There is, and so if you do stand up, you want to bring it. Here's the thing, though. If you've got
I think the energy with them, I felt like the energy came from control of the stage, control of themselves, and confidence. Like no one could ever say, looking at any of the footage of Stephen Wright or Hedberg, for examples, that they came across as uncertain, and I think that's the crowd is very much sharks, and they'll smell that blood in the water. You have to go on there believing this is my home. I own all of you. Fuck you. I'm. You know what I mean? Like you have to have that kind of attitude a bit.
Yeah, kind of. Well, here's the thing. It's not fuck you. It's I want to hold your hand is what it is. Because so you're making love to the audience. You're not R. Kelly in them. Because there's a lot of comics, they come out there and they just piss all over the audience, and they think that's comedy. They think they're being a Bill Hicks or a George Carlin. They don't realize what's going on. See, the George Carlin and the Bill Hicks, these men they build rapport. They make a relationship with the audience. As Bill Hicks said, you lead them to the edge, then you push them off. You can't do that if you don't build a relationship. So yes, you do have to have energy. You do have to own the stage. It is your show, and you have to have confidence, even if they don't like it. But simultaneously, he was as a good comedian. Simultaneously, must make a rapport with that audience, and that rapport could be like Charlie, like Kaufman did. It could be casting yourself as the bad guy using Tony Clifton. Because he made Tony Clifton the villain, and so that was still establishing a positive rapport because it was the relationship he intended to establish with the audience, which was antagonism between a drama villain, the kind you throw peanuts in Boo at. I mean, Tony Clifton was your basic Snively Whiplash, if you will, but of comedy.
Well, Andy Kaufman was very, it's funny. This ties into something that one of our friends and a former guest on the show, Paul McGowan. He's a British artist, world renowned, and something that he has said is that art, like trolling, internet trolling, online, Facebook, whatever, what have you, whatever, is art, and that because art, whether it be painting or otherwise, is essentially, it has the same message or premise or intention as trolling does, to challenge and to subvert, or to shock and kind of shake your foundations a bit, get you to think, rile you up, and I think that that's true, especially with comedy.
Yeah, I can see that. I hadn't thought of it that way. I can see that as an art form. And
I think, and my point with that was just to say that Kaufman, in a sense, was a troll before the term had even been, coined.
Andy Kaufman and Steve Martin, they're like two halves of the same sort of modern absurdist humor that would come to dominate the time we're in now. And now everybody's trying to emulate what they did to a degree, but they were 40 years ahead of their time. And that's, they really were. And what I like with comedy, subversion is good. The difficulty is so many people get so caught up with the message they're trying to bring with art, they forget its larger purpose is to do something good in your brain, to impart a good feeling, to inspire you in one way or another, to make you laugh, to make you feel good. So what I think is most important, genuinely producing actual levity and humor in the crowd. And if you can do that and sprinkle in a good little Aesop's Fable message or something on the back end, good for you. But the problem is when people get because it happens on the right and the left, people get so bound up in what they're trying to say that they forget the medium they're trying to say it through, which is comedy. And so today, all these leftist progressives, they preach at you, and laughter signifies agreement of a political ideology rather than ingestion and response to a piece of humor that the audience enjoys. That's a big problem. And it needs to be stopped, or if it doesn't stop, it'll be the end of it. But I think it's going to stop. I think, thank God Trump got in. I think that's actually going to out a lot of these folks, and it's going to stop it. But if it doesn't, it will end comedy. It'll be like in Nazi Germany, and America will be joked with like South Park did to the Germans who built Funny Bot, because Germans are great engineers, but not comedians. That'll be what happens anyway.
Comedy, it'll just go underground. More so than it already is. Like comedy will be, in back alleys. Somebody will be like, "Hey, you want to hear some jokes? Yeah. Like, you want to hear some jokes? I got 20 bucks a pop.
You want some puns or some impressions? I got some great impressions. I do this Kermit thing. You'll pitch yourself. It'll be great. Yeah, no, that's funny.
To play devil's advocate a little bit.
Sure.
I'd like to discuss something that one of my favorite comedians, if not my all-time favorite comedian, rest his soul, Patrice O'Neal.
Oh,
something that I really feel like he died before his time. He was on the cusp.
Oh, man.
That's a comedian I believe was well beyond his time, way ahead of his time. And it's sad that he died. But there was a show called The Green Room, and it was it was on HBO or something like that. This was quite a few years back, and it used to be like a bunch of comedians, like 4 or 5, sitting around on couches around a table, and then the audience was around them, and they were just talking. They just talk for like an hour or two. Yeah, you're right. Showtime. Most of the episodes are on YouTube. Patrice is on one of those episodes, and it's one of my favorite episodes. But he gets into there's a point where they start discussing comedy and making the audience laugh, and he says something to the effect of, when half the audience is holding their sides because their sides hurt from laughing, and the other half are shocked and disgusted, that's perfection. Like he said, you should always strive to make half your audience fucking laughing and the other half shocked. And I think that's such an interesting take. I think that's definitely something he succeeded at consistently. What do you think about that perspective?
I think having that skill set is important, but it will not work for all rooms, and he knows that. Because you can't go to a corporate gig. You can't go to a corporate gig for Geico that's paying you $5,000 and try and do that. If you're going to that gig, your goal is to get everybody on your side. However, if you're running your own show where people are coming to see you, you rent it out in the theater, then by all means, he is 100% correct. I'd say it depends on the venue and the level of comedy you're at. And I think you were right. He was right on the cusp. And that's when people are coming to see you for you and it's your show. That's what you're trying to do. Until then, you have to be able to play. You've got to be able to change hats on the fly. I've done old folks' homes. I've done Christian schools. I've done chicken restaurants. I've done bowling alleys. I've done laundromats. I've even done comedy clubs. There's it's a fact.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, well, it's true though, and that's how it is. Steve Martin wrote a book called Born Standing Up. It's about 200 pages. I read it in one sitting because I was on the road at the time and didn't have the money to buy it from the Barnes and Noble, but I didn't want to steal it either. So I sat down on one of the footstools and I read it in one sitting. And he talks about comedy is very seldom ideal. It's very seldom in ideal circumstances. When he started out, he was doing comedy to no audience in Disney. He was just in a room doing jokes, hoping somebody'd come and sit down. And that, believe it or not, that probably really worked in his favor as a developing comedian from the psychological sense, from the owning the stage sense, from being able to, because I've done a show for one person before. I've done a full 20-minute set.
Who are you talking about again? Is it Steve Martin?
Steve Martin, yeah. The book is called Born Standing Up. Yeah.
He worked at when he was when he was like a teenager, he worked at Knott's Berry Farm here.
Yeah. So you're down there and you're around Irvine?
I'm not far from Irvine. I'm maybe like 40 minutes to an hour away.
Oh, okay. All right. I got a show down in Costa Mesa in a few weeks. Well, if you want, it's been almost 2 hours on the show here. I can give you.
Oh yeah. Do you want to put, dude? Please, if you have plugs,
I do. I got a couple of them. So Thursday, I'm at Neonopolis. That's off Fremont Street in Las Vegas, and the show's at 9 or 10. I'll be doing some time there. And then on the 15th, I'll be at Levity Live in Oxnard. That's by Ventura. It's north of LA. And then the 16th, I'm going to be at Bricks down in it's actually Beachside, I think. It's between Long Beach and Huntington Beach, and it's a neat little spot run by a gal named April Latshaw. I'll be down there on the 16th.
The name of the place is Beachside?
No, it's Bricks. It's at a place called. It's not Oceanside. That's north of San Diego.
No, that's not.
There's a little
between Long Beach and Huntington Beach.
Yeah, there's a little town, something beach or something ocean, and it's right in the middle of those. Yes, that's it. Sunset Beach. That's it.
Okay.
And Bricks.
That's a great little town.
It is. It's so laid back. There's a place called Bricks. It's usually a small show, but if people could show up, everybody'd love it. And then
when is that?
That's Wednesday the 16th, and I believe that show's going to start at around 7. And then
this month?
Yeah, this month, the 16th of January. And then let's see, 17th.
Well, I might see you there.
Please do. 7th, if you can't do that one, the 17th, I'm at the LA Connection in Burbank, which is another little show. Tiny. I used to live in Burbank. You know where it's a little improv theater. They do stand up and improv sometimes. 21st, I'll be at Costa Mesa. That's the one that got me on this. It's at the Anchor Bar, and that's an open mic that's 100 comics that's curated by Evan Cassidy of Fuck Yeah Nation fame. And he's very funny. It's a great show, great pizza. 26th, which is Saturday, of January, I'll be doing a show at 6120 Ensign Avenue in North Hollywood. It's a house show, kind of a secret thing. And then on the 5th, I'll be in on the 30 off Ventura Boulevard. I think it's right near Studio City at a show called All-Star Comedy. Granison Crawford runs that. The 7th, I'll be in La Jolla at the Comedy Store, the Comedy Store, doing a show with a guy named Russell Brock. Then Wednesday, the 13th of February, I'm at the Booby Trap. Show starts at 7, or maybe show starts at 8. I got to be there at 7. And then the 19th of February, I'm going to be in Ontario at the Ontario Improv doing the Freak Show again. So that's my that's my docket through February right now.
Are you in our Facebook group?
I should be. I believe I was added. I think so.
Yeah, he's in there.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
If you want, I would love, and you're more than welcome. I know a lot of groups don't allow advertising. We're not that way at all. So if you would like to post in the group about your shows, your schedule, by all means, please do.
Yeah, I might blast a little bit before the shows. I won't be obnoxious. One thing I want to let your audience know, it seems like you've got a bunch of open-minded cats from either side of the political fence. A lot of the shows I'm going to be going to, they're more progressive, and I have to be a little more secretive. So not all the acts at those shows are going to be as open as I've been.
Sure.
So that's just an advisor. But there's still some great comics there that are trying to toe the middle and not piss anybody off, or they're going off board. I have fun with them all. They're professional colleagues to me. So just as an advisor there. And then, that's basically my shows. I've got an album out called Weather Local, which is music, not comedy, and it's goofy. I don't know. It's like trippy piano stuff, and my vocals are too, they're over the top. They're embarrassing. But I'm trying to make money. That's Weather Local. And I got a book called Amphibian out that nobody's read, but it's available on Amazon. And then there's a novel called The Thief and the Sacrifice, which is out of print now, but there's a free galley copy. If you just go to my Facebook page for The Thief and the Sacrifice, scroll down, you can find the galley, read it for yourself. If you like it, great. If not, no big deal. I got to find another publisher for it. And then,
what are the books about?
Amphibian takes the next step from Blade Runner. Blade Runner asks, do androids dream of electric sheep? Amphibian asks, do androids have a soul? And it's basically a chase story about a robot on a space station that's like Space Disney. And it's kind of over the top and cheesy. It's not my best work, but it got published, so I pimp it. I wrote it in college. Yeah, it's okay, but it's got some good moments. Some stuff I don't like as well. Yeah, sci-fi.
I love sci-fi. Yeah, well, obviously it's sci-fi.
Yeah, and then The Thief and the Sacrifice is a time travel novel about an antediluvian civilization of greater technological capacity than modernity, and it's based on Ecclesiastes.
Antediluvian, that's a great word.
I love it. Pre-flood, if you will. It's based on Ecclesiastes 1:9 out of Scripture, which says, "The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there's no new thing under the sun." Which also coincidentally sounds like a Pink Floyd B-sides lyric. But I love that verse. So the whole story is about a futuristic society that exists before the flood, and that's Atlantis. And a guy gets to time travel back there accidentally. And again, it's got some good points and some bad points that need a rewrite. So
what's that story about the city that would disappear and reappear? Brigadoon.
Oh, I haven't heard of that. Brigadoon? That's what that's about? I love the name.
Yeah. I think it's Scottish even. So, which, harkens back to your original.
That's right up my alley. I love that. That's like, it's just it ain't what I need to be.
Your explanation.
I'm going to have to shut the live stream off now. But it's been a great interview so far.
I didn't even know we were live streaming. That's awesome.
Well, hey, listen, it's been about 2 hours, and I got to head out too. Thanks for having me on this show. If there's a link to share, I'll share it when you get it out.
Kevin, thank you so much for being a part of our show, man. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you. It's been fun. It's been fun.
It's been a lot of fun. I loved every minute of it. We hope that you'll come back at some point, maybe.
I'd love to. Just let me know as long as I haven't got any gigs. I've got a free night. Yeah, let's do it.
That'd be great. All right, man. Well, you have a great one.
You too. Catch you later.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Au revoir. All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye, buddy.
Bye.
That was